Beautiful. It's fun to be here. One of my titles is Executive Director of a small nonprofit, so I'm required to carry on propaganda. And you are going to receive propaganda tonight. So here, I have three things for you. Tristan, can you get those? So there's just, one thing is about source, one thing is some stats about trafficking here locally, and then this is a 5K run for hope and walk in her shoes. That's coming up on June 6th. And so over here off of Minnehaha School, we're doing our first 5K for anti-trafficking, and we're asking the men to step it up because we're also going to ask the men to do a short walk in high heels to try to identify walk in her shoes. You guys can figure that out. So, well, if you bring your own high shoes, that's your discretion. Okay. So, but if you want us to provide them, they're probably going to be pretty high. So, with that, it's really fun to be here at Hope. Feel like we've had a wonderful partnership and friends here. 2011, we renovated a building. We've worked with homeless youth for 20 years. In March, it was my 20th year with Source. We've done a combination of outreach, and if you work with homeless youth in Minneapolis, you're going to come across a lot of young people victimized by prostitution. And 95, we started our first transitional home because we saw an incredible need for recovery resources with the marginalized. And that term just really speaks to what happens. It's a chemical dependency term if you Google recovery capital, but it speaks to what happens after treatment. So we have some wonderful things have developed in our culture here in Minneapolis. Is known for treatment in the late 60s, early 70s, kind of the inpatient treatment models, the Hazeltons, and were developed here, world renowned. But Recovery Resources ask the question, what happens after someone who has been caught in chemical dependency, goes through treatment, then graduates from whatever said program, whether Christian or non-Christian, what happens next? And the reality is individuals tend to relapse, end up back in the old lifestyle, become repeat offenders. I know individuals, if you work with those who are in addictions, if you work with the marginalized, at the age of 22, 23, I know individuals who have been in treatment 10 times. And just kind of seems to be, they do great in treatment, but once they get out, it's just a matter of weeks, if not days, that they end up being pulled back in. And so what Recovery Resources speaks about is basically a combination of a community that gives encouragement and support, along with practical opportunities of education and career, okay? And so the individuals that make it, and a lot of stats say this, the treatment, and yes, there's treatment centers that you could say have higher grades than others, but the reality is the individuals who have a supportive family back at home, okay, and are going to be given opportunities are the ones that are going to be able to have a lifelong of recovery. Some of you might be aware of individuals, family, friends, that have been and had treatment 20 years ago. And they, again, went through treatment and come out of there, then they had a family that was waiting for them, they had relatives and friends that really wanted to support their sobriety. And want to give them a lot of grace, were there to encourage and support them, and then also made sure they had opportunities. A lot of them had jobs waiting for them. So the reality is when this doesn't exist with individuals, and if we get into the statistics of just with broken homes and in end of the 90s, more than half of the kids in America will be raised a portion of their childhood without their natural father in their home. I mean, that's a 20-year-old statistic. I'm not going to go through a lot of statistics, but with trafficking in America, the average age of entry is 13. The average age of drug use is 11. So this is just the realities. Poverty isn't just contained to our urban areas. Within all the suburbs, there's homeless youth in every school district, in the metro and kind of the outside metro, and also in the rural. Every county in Minnesota had trafficking charges last year. We're a global society. It doesn't look like when I was a kid a long time ago, Hennepin Avenue was known for prostitution. In the 80s, early 90s in general, Loring Park was known for young male prostitution. There's still East Lake Street in Bloomington Avenue. There's still situations there where you can visibly different areas of East St. Paul. But the realities of all that is the trouble with normal is it always get worse. Does anybody know who wrote that? Anybody? You guys are too young. Bruce Cockburn. I would have gave you a book if you would have came up with that answer. I'm not sure which book I would have gave you, but I would have gave you a book. So that seems to be the currency around here. So one of the biggest things in working with the marginalized, our heart is just really the simple thing of just, we're called to disciple, we think we came up with that on our own, that God wants us to disciple, and so that was my humor. But we really didn't think that. As we did this, we had this people group of the marginalized. And so there's lots of things when we started working with homeless youth and unchurched, in the 90s it was called like the alternative crowd. We did stuff with raves, we did stuff with goth kids, with Marilyn Manson kids. It was right when kind of the first Columbine shooting thing happened. And so this is all like the end of the 90s. And our heart was to figure out, we'd have young adults. We'd have different individuals who were just in, we would have homeless youth come to Bible studies. And then after the Bible studies, they would leave. And they would go nowhere. And so it was all of a sudden these situations, and we'd have situations, okay, we're going to disciple, and we had some campus ministry background. It's like, oh yeah, we have these 10 books, and we'll go through them one at a time, and you take this home, and you do the study, and then we come back together. We had 17, 18-year-old individuals that couldn't read more than 3rd or 4th grade. And it was all like these new things. How do you disciple individuals that are marginalized? And not just with education levels, but also, dealing with addictions and dealing with incest and dealing with, abuses, dealing with, the people that saved my life were the other homeless youth that engage in survival sex or they engage in prostitution. And it's an incredible communal thing of bringing back what you get to each other so we all survive together. And so it's this culture of just dysfunction, but also just an incredible, these are the people that saved my life. And trying to figure out how do those things get broken. And so, and we just kind of dove right in, and one of the first things is we got to provide some type of housing. We got to provide some type of atmosphere where people can grow, where they're not going to get bombarded from friends and sometimes family. And we had kids from Covens. One kid, his mom was a witch and his dad was a warlock, and he talked about finding a Bible when he was 8 and hiding it under his mattress and taking it out at night and reading it, which is like hilarious compared to what Christian kids have under their mattresses. Taking out, with that. And but anyways. And so through that, our heart is and just to give you just got a couple minutes here, but as we look at just, and over the years, we don't do raves anymore, and there's an urban arts center. It's kind of our home base, and we have like a dozen different apartments, individual apartments, that different people in community houses and transitional homes. And, the heart is that we're providing some recovery resources. We're providing, with the trafficking ministry, the annex. Again, it really speaks to that thing of, women end up back in the lifestyle because they get out and they have nowhere to go. They have no resources. They end up in the same home, the same neighborhood, and they end up right back in the lifestyle. And we're at a time right now where tons and tons of resources from our government, from large public foundations, from the church, are going to go into more institutional resources for women, for safe houses, for treatment centers, for recovery programs, and that money should go there. It is badly needed. I mean, we're coming out of a time where women have been treated like criminals and have put in the category of, pimp and drug dealer. And they can get out if they want to. And not treated like, and the men involved would get slaps on the wrist. I mean, and there, a lot of the laws are changing, and there's legislation that's happening. But I think right now for the church, the question is, it's like, okay, can we provide some recovery resources for women that want to come out? And that's the biggest banner that we have right now with our anti-trafficking, is really asking ourselves that, asking the church that. There's women on waiting lists right now. If you go, that card right there is a couple years old, and it says that there's less than 100 beds in America, and I apologize because that's stat wrong. We think that there might be around 250 and 300 beds. I'll even say 500. But that's in the whole country, the country of opportunity. It's not uncommon that women are saying, I want out, and they have to literally be told, you're on a waiting list. You guys know of Breaking Free. They say they have a waiting list of over 100 now. And so one of our things to ask the church is, if women want out, and women are saying, hey, I'm willing to be part of a program, I'm willing to continue my life skills, I'm willing to go to church, I'm willing to volunteer to church, be part of a church community, I'd like an opportunity to get out. And we still have to say, well, you'll be put on a waiting list. And so that's one of the big things that we like to throw out there, and as we look at connecting with the marginalized and looking at this injustice and what can we do. A verse that has really connected with us is another verse from Isaiah 49, 8 through 12. Who is this connected to the internet?
Yeah,
but it's what? Yeah, can you pull up that verse? Rob asked if I had a PowerPoint. I said no, so I'd throw him a curveball. So
you can hit a curveball, right?
Isaiah 49, 8 through 10. And this verse is very significant. And just to look at that for a moment, those are needy kids. Give to those kids. And I'll start reading this. So verse 8, this is what the Lord says. In the time of my favor, I will answer you. In the day of salvation, I will help you. I will keep you and make you to be a covenant for the people, to restore the land, to reassign its desolate inheritances, to say to the captives, come out, and those in darkness, be free. Goes on to say they will feed beside the roads, they'll find pasture in every barren land. Verse 10, they will neither hunger nor thirst, nor will the desert heat or the sun beat on them. He who has compassion on them will guide them. There, that section. Boom. And just real quickly, this thing about compassion and reaching out to the marginalized is just really huge. And as looking at the ministry, how do you do stuff with the marginalized? It's figure out how to develop a compassion. And compassion is different than pity. Okay? Pity, we're confronted with it and draws us to give the change in our pocket. To give a few dollars or whatnot. Compassion wants us to learn about this person's story and why they're there and how we can help them not be there tomorrow. If you do a quick word study on compassion in the New Testament, on just Jesus, okay? And again, for sake of time, I'm not going to do this, but Jesus was not, it doesn't portray Jesus praying in the morning, which he did quite often, the Holy Spirit birthing a compassion in him, and then him going out to the crowds. Basically, what it portrays is when Jesus saw people, when he came in contact with them, when he spoke to them, he had a compassion that was raised up inside of him. You know, when he's feeding the 5,000, he's like, hey, I've been with these people 3 days. And it said he had a compassion on them. Don't send them away. You know, and then he feeds them. You know, when he came and he saw the crowds, it says he saw them, he had compassion on them, and that's where he says, wow, man, this harvest is plentiful. The lost son, the prodigal son, beautiful story. But what we read is, as the father was looking down the road, he saw his son, and then compassion overwhelmed him. And all social norms went awry, and he ran. Isn't that beautiful? That's how God wants to be depicted. And so this thing about compassion, I just encourage, and you know, I don't know any other way to encourage people to generate compassion. And Paul goes on to talk about, hey, clothe yourself with compassion. And James talks about the importance of compassion. You guys can look that up. But this thing about compassion, when people ask me, you know, about longevity in ministering to the poor and being in ministry, and it's like, man, if you don't figure out how to develop a compassion, you're just, you know, this is just going to be a job. And it's somewhat thankless, and the marginalized are messy, and they're pretty much, many individuals are socially inept, and it doesn't, you know, so, you know, that thing about compassion allows you to come alongside people. Last Sunday, we had a woman, we have a Sunday morning service, and there was a woman that came from our food shelf, and there's only like 70, 75 people, and as she came in, she had never been to our Sunday service before. It was great to see her. But she, as we started doing worship, you know, and the room is about the size of this room, she starts asking people for money, like one at a time, you know, just going around. While people are worshiping, people that didn't even know her. You know, and so, I mean, it's like there was no social etiquette, there was no couth, there was very little tact. She was in need, she was out of church, and she needed a few bucks, you know. And you know, and so part of that, I even saw with our own people, just there was an uncomfortableness. There was a little bit of, you know, come on, you know, just wait till the end of the service. And then my wife gave her some money, and she didn't even have the gall to stay. She just left, you know. And you know, so part of that is, bless her heart. The woman needed $3 or $4, you know. And so in one sense, it kind of threw us off a little bit. And it was, you know, you weren't sure exactly, because we didn't exactly figure what was going on right away, you know, with that. But you know, if we don't have a compassion for her, then she's just a problem. And you know what? Maybe there were some visitors there that day that kind of turned them off. You know, but I don't think so. But there could have been, you know, in that situation. And I could give you a lot of other situations that you really just have to kind of chuckle about. You know, and part of that, I just think God really smiles on it. But part of the problem is you know, working with the marginal, man, as far as like timetables, you know, and probably the hardest thing is just how individuals break your heart. You know, and in the sense of, you see individuals like make incredible steps forward. And you get to pray with them, and you come alongside with them, and you help them, and you make the sacrifices for them. And then they go do really stupid things. And their mess isn't like my mess. Like if I get angry at my wife and I say something short with her that I shouldn't say, it happens every other year or so. But then we get to the year of Jubilee, and then everything's cool. We're waiting for that 49th year. Man, it's gonna rock. But you know, and sorry, I totally lost my place on that one. Just thinking of that year of Jubilee is kind of cool if that could really happen. But so this thing about compassion is just key. And what I would encourage you guys to do, and like when we go out to shelters and we take volunteers with us, or we go out to any type of homeless ministry or whatnot, the number one thing I tell people, you know what? Give people story. Find out, go say, hey, I'm a part of this church. We're doing an outreach thing. I'm not sure I know what I'm doing. I don't want to offend you. But you know what? I'm just curious about your story. You take a humble approach like that, 9 out of 10 people will talk to you. Well, some of the mentally ill people might not talk to you, but they won't talk to anybody, you know, or they'll probably freak you out because they freak me out. But anyways, you know, but part of that is just to say, it's like I tell people, leave here tonight that if you'd see that person tomorrow on the street, you'd say, hey, John, how you doing? That like you made a new friend. Until we can figure out, and whether it's a shelter, whether it's, you know, after-school programs, whether it's working the trafficking victim, whatever situation, figure out how to interact with people. Kind of breaks my heart when I go into a shelter and I see churches doing outreach of helping with food and simply just kind of put it on the plate. And kind of that's their deal. And they just have no interaction. And there's such an us and them in that room. And it's almost a little bit oppressive in and of itself. And actually, one of the great ways you can help shelters and food shelves, because they're overrun and they don't have a lot of staff, is just to go in, like we'll bring interactive art to places like that, and just really say, hey, we're going to come with the spirit of joy, and we're going to try to have a little party here with the kids and the families and whoever wants to, and sometimes we'll bring drums and guitars. But the heart of that is just say we're going to put the same amount of energy if we had a party at our place, like we'd have an outreach and wanted to invite people to come in. For a lot of years, you know, if you know, and this is the thing about pity and compassion as well, you know, there's a lot of please don't hear me disrespect anything the body of Christ is doing, because that's not my heart at all. And we're not the experts, and we don't do it perfectly, and you know, we have wonderful and terrible stories as well. You know, a lot of at our place, we don't see a lot. We open the doors when we do different art openings or concerts or whatever. And if we haven't gone out and connected with people, we don't see a lot of people just come in because we open our doors. And that's what I'll see a lot of times in the church, the difference between pity and compassion, because pity makes you want to have some type of outreach where we're going to open our doors and have people come, but we don't think really what's after this, or even if they'll come in, or why they don't come into our church. You know? Why are there so many women that are victimized by trafficking and want out, and why aren't they just flocking to churches and say, help me? Because there's such a stigma within mainstream society. There's such a stigma within culture. There's such a stigma within the American church. Wrapping up, I want to share, just a couple of pictures. And Jesus gave us a lot of visuals, a lot of agriculture pictures. One of my favorite, as far as just thinking of a practical thing, is just, the idea, if you came upon an abandoned farm, and there was a pen, and there was a sheep in the middle of that pen, okay? And you had food, the sheep was starving, and the sheep was wounded, it was bleeding, and you had medicine. Okay? And there's the hurting, starving sheep. And you're to minister to it, to administer it. Okay? So what would be a good way to do this? This is the interactive part of the talk. Anybody? Give me some advice on how to do this. Feed them first, they get a little trust. Okay. So you're going to tell me I'm just going to go into this pen and bring the food up to them, right? Okay. Anybody else? Any farm kids? You are a farm kid, Kurt.
I did have sheep growing up.
Nice. What's wrong with that? Not to call you out at all.
Super scared.
They're super scared. They're super dumb. I don't want to make that analogy with the marginalized at all. But you know what's going to happen if I open that gate and go in? That sheep is going to look at me, it's going to turn and bolt, and it's going to not even remember there's a fence there, and it's going to get caught in the fence and hurt itself even more. Now, I've never done this with a sheep, but I've done this at least at like 14 national parks and about a dozen Minnesota state parks with the chipmunks and the woodpile, okay? So me and the kids, we have the granola bar and yogurt. That's the Wohler family breakfast. And if we're good, we get a little fresh blueberries in there. But what do you do with that chipmunk? You start out by taking a piece of that granola. What do you throw it about 10 feet away, right? You get them coming. You do that a few times, and then you just wait. And then you throw it about 5 feet away. And after, and it usually maybe takes me, I have to be at the campsite for a good full day, and this has to happen about 3 or 4 times, but I can get that chipmunk coming right up on my knee, not just on my shoe. That's the real challenge. Every once in a while, you can get them actually running up to your knee and eating off your knee. Well, what was that about? That was about making contact and gaining trust. And so our sheep analogy would be, yes, we have food, but we got to figure out a way to gain trust with this sheep. That's incredibly, has been abused by people, and I'm a stranger, and I'm kind of big and hairy. Sometimes that's an advantage, okay? And so, I might do things like I might kneel down, I'm not so intimidating to a sheep when I kneel down, I might talk really soft. I might make no sudden movements. I might take that food, and you know what? I might just set it in the pen and then back away. In fact, I might even leave and come back in an hour or the next day. And pretty soon, right, I can get that sheep to not be so tense, and more the day will come, and it might take a long time to feed that sheep out of your hand. And I could even get to the point where it's going to trust me to even minister that medicine, right? And that to me is very much, this combination of making contact and gaining trust, being available and accessible when people are ready for more. And this is what we believe we saw Jesus do. He gave these broad brushstroke parables. The kingdom of God is like this, like this, like this. People, were curious. They, some of those people were in the back of the crowd just kind of watching and listening. Some of them didn't want to be seen there. And some of those people slowly got closer and closer. A lot of homeless youth will migrate south in the wintertime. And we'll go down to Florida, January, February. And we'll set up a kitchen and a prayer tent and a campsite. And there'll be hundreds, if not a couple thousand kids, depending on the time you are, in the Ocala forest. And every year we'll see kids, we'll set up that first meal, and there'll be kids that I'll catch them, they'll be, 100, 200 feet away off in the woods, and they'll kind of be looking around a tree, just kind of watching what's going to do. Some of them are they're a little it's down in the Bible Belt, so they're used to Christians coming and doing some good things and also some wacky things. So they're kind of wondering what's actually going to happen, and then 3 times a day we do a little liturgy prayer and some worship songs and offer to pray for people, and right after a meal, and some of them are sitting there right for a meal, and slowly you'll see, the kids coming close. Some of the kids want to fight us when we first come. One year we pulled in a church bus, which was probably a mistake. Church gave us a bus down there. And the cool thing was we painted this bus with the homeless youth. And we took Psalms 33 and talked about a new reason for hope and yada, yada, yada. Anyways, there was like 5 kids with sticks blocking the entry and just totally taking the posture, you're not coming in here. Because you're in here to kind of preach fire and brimstone at us, and we want none of that. And we don't want you to hurt our people. They were guardians. Some of those same kids were crying, actually threatening to take out our distributor so we wouldn't leave, a week later, with that. But the main point I want to make, and I want to wrap this up, is what we see as a practical way of what Jesus did that is an application for us is figuring out how to have compassion, come in contact with people, building a relationship with them. Do that through making contact and gaining trust, okay? And then secondly is to be available and accessible when people are ready to come back for more. And most of our stories aren't meeting someone in one night and telling, sharing the gospel and them giving their life to Christ in that conversation. Most of our stories we do a lot of seed planting. And we let them know, if you're ready for more. When you're working with women in trafficking, our outreach approach is a lot around, hey, when you're ready to get out, you contact us. And we'll do whatever we can to assist with that and to be with that. And we've gotten calls 2 months later, 2 years later. We've had several individuals that came back to us more than 10 years later and basically said, I'm ready now. A couple of them just had kids. And they're like, man, I had this child and I can't do my partying anymore and I know I need God and you guys were only Christians that we knew and trusted, and so I'm not sure what to do, but I know my life has to change, and I'm ready now. And that's what, if an individual isn't ready, there's just not a whole lot you can do. There's total, it's important to keep people safe and to feed the poor and to provide what we can. But it's like when there's with a lot of individuals that we meet, they're really okay with continuing to kind of walk in the slop that they're in, and it breaks our heart. But part of that is we believe and we've seen that we're the only voice that are saying, you know what, there's hope, there's different. Their normal has just been, and a lot of women in trafficking, there's really no hope for them to get out. When we talk about being enslaved, no, they're not in chains. They're not enslaved. But the idea of getting out, a lot of the pimps will say, well, go ahead, leave. You want to live in a shelter? They'll take away your kids. Go ahead, turn me in. They'll put you away for 5 to 10 years. You want to be in prison? And when an individual starts to hear and believe, wow, I could actually get out of this and things could be different. To us, that's like obvious. But to many individuals who are marginalized, that's just hope it's just like something they can't afford. It's a luxury that is a foreign concept. So that's kind of my 2 bits worth. I don't, Rob, I think I've taken my time, but I'll just give it to you. I think the ice cream's melting.
Before you step away, if anybody has any questions, specifically for Peter, everybody's talking about here, or maybe some of the work that they do, how they can get involved, there's a sign-up sheet I know in the back. He's going to stick around for a little bit.
Absolutely.
But is there any questions, maybe even specifically about justice or anti-trafficking, that he could address, maybe just on the local level from what he's seen and what they're working to do over at Source? Anybody have questions?
Yeah, do you live in Whittier? Like, do you live in the neighborhood? Is it community development or is it an outreach program? You know what I mean?
Sure. Me and my wife moved in Whittier in 1996. And we lived above the Fallout Urban Arts Center when we first got in 2001. There's like a 3-bedroom apartment there. And then in like 2007, 2008, she went and got pregnant for the 4th time. I guess I had something to do with that. We outgrew the apartment, and we moved like a mile south, and a mile east. So now we're like, right by Powderhorn. We just kind of jumped over Powderhorn. You know, and it's a little more residential. But like I said, we have a lot of staff that are living, you know, part of our transitional home model is to have role models that are living right across the hall. And both in our men's community house as well as the trafficking program. And the model is again, it's a sober house model, so it's not treatment or safe house. But the heart is once women come through that, then there's a combination of a caseworker that's guiding them through an individual life skill program. And then there's volunteers, and actually there have been a handful of women from Hope that have lived there for a year or more as residents. And they're there to like volunteer 3 hours a week and share a couple meals. Again, if you think of that recovery resources, so they're there to be that community of encouragement and support, while the caseworker is making sure they have the resources for career and education. And when I talk to individual caseworkers that work with the marginalized in general or trafficking women, they just salivate over this because, again, they totally understand. I mean, even in prison, they can get college education. They can get individuals can get lots of training. But the problem is, again, as they come out, you know, they end up in the old neighborhood and just with the old friends and relationships. So.
Time for one more question that you can ask. Otherwise, like I said, Peter, I'll stick around. It says until midnight. Sure. Anybody else, though? Ask a question.
What is your number one need right now?
Our number one need would probably, well, not to try to tie it into my talk, but individuals with compassion, with hearts to be spiritual mothers and fathers. And I don't just say that in your guys as parents. I believe, you know, teenagers and young adults can be spiritual mothers and fathers, and just have desire to be alongside of individuals, a part of a community, you know, to make individuals give them that support and encouragement. And like I said, our role models, it's great. We purposefully don't want our role models to be staff because we want the women to see individuals that are going to school, that are working jobs, you know, that have relationships with boyfriends and men. And we want married couples to share meals and, again, that they can interact with the church. You know, part of our heart, one of our biggest goals is after they spend 6 months to 18 months with us, that they'll leave there and the local church isn't a place of stigma anymore. It's a place where I can have continued recovery resources, whether they move out of town, now that they know that community there isn't as intimidating, because they've been a part of it, and they've interacted with it, and they've had good friends there. So, and men to walk in high heels at the 5K. Those are the two biggest needs. Or people to watch the men walking in the high heels. Those three things are big. And someone that does no, I'm sorry. Thanks, Rob.
All right, let's give him a hand.